on the screen. If we want that one. Okay, so thank you for that. So you know what you've got to do. And my job is to get out of your way and just let you do it. But I want you to learn a few things, and I do need to actually assess that you're doing what you said you'd do last semester. Right? So that's the aim of this semester. If I can figure out how this works. That's the other thing. There we go. So that's why there is virtually nothing on the list there, right? We're going to have weekly meetings. Each team has to do something different as far as what you're producing is concerned. What the accessible items are, and I'll go into the detail shortly, but we need to do basically what we did last semester, a mid-semester-ish design document and presentation, and an end of semester final design document and presentation. And you should actually have something, right? A piece of hardware that you're going to show off. So that's why there's not a lot there. And just a reminder that what we're aiming to do in the first part of this semester is to prototype stuff, and then in the second half of the semester is to finish the design, or at least to finish the prototype and show that it works or figure out why it didn't. So that's roughly what I'm going to do. It's very important that you keep in touch with me and with each other, right? And that's why that weekly status meetings is a 20% lump. Okay, each meeting is maybe a little under 2%, right? But you need to meet, and you need to document that you've met. You will see in Blackboard that I think I've turned on everything you can turn on as far as the bells and whistles for each group is concerned. I tend to use the journal function in Blackboard for you to document your weekly status meetings, and I'll talk a little bit about what a weekly status meeting is shortly. Doesn't have to be long. If you've ever worked in an organisation that does software, sometimes those sorts of organisations have what they call a daily stand-up, right? And it's not a comedy routine. It is a meeting where there's not allowed to be any chairs, right? The aim is to make it short so you don't get comfortable. I am actually wondering whether I should be standing. I don't usually sit when I talk. I need to put that over. And that way I can pace a bit. I don't know whether that gets you on your nerves. Sometimes people it does, but the point of a status meeting is that it doesn't take much time and it is information rich, right? Maybe the information is a bit boring, but they're the best sort of status meetings. That means you're on target. If the status meetings are not boring, that means there's a fire somewhere. And then we've got detailed design doc, mid-semester presentation, final design doc, final design review, peer review. So one of the things I'm experimenting with, and I apologise, you're all guinea pigs. One of the things I'm experimenting with is student peer review. Right? So what that means is, for this document and this document, I will give you my feedback, but I'm going to get each of you to give feedback, hopefully to the other teams, right, on their design documents. And the aim is so that you see more than just your design document, right, in detail. And again, that's why there's a reasonable chunk there. So you're all wanting to get out the door. Some of you already have jobs. That's great. I expect you to work professionally as part of this class. That means turning up at meetings. Sometimes it's impossible for you to turn up. That is okay, but you tell people, right? I would like you to use version control on all your projects, or rather all your project items, particularly if you're writing software. It's invaluable to use something like GitHub. So locally it's Git, and then the remote repository where you can store it for free is GitHub. There's others. There's Bitbucket, which also uses Git. There's GitLab, which also uses Git. I'm not particularly interested in one particular offsite as the other, just so long as it's free and I can see it. And like I said, report status weekly. The usual status reports will be, I'm going to get you to talk per group in each of these meetings, right? And I'll talk a little bit shortly about what I expect. Right, so I have taken out of each of your preliminary design documents your plan. Okay? So for parking automation, I've labelled the stuff with this yellowy transparent overlay as the stuff that's done. That's basically last semester. I suppose I should have labelled summer break as done, because we're back, but that's what it is, right? So here's the bridge group. And again, basically it's everything on this right-hand side. And then that one's a bit hard to read, but it was a bit wide for splitting it into two and making the font a bit bigger. But anyway, that's what it is. So that's what you all have to do. Right. What I'd like now, if possible, and I don't think I'm going to be able to hear you, but at least the microphone isn't going to be able to hear you. So we'll see how we go.
I apologize. I checked the schedule last night and it said 11:45, but it's 11:20 now.
Right? Yes.
I apologize.
I thought it was 11, so I went the other way. Anyway. Okay, we have a full complement. Very good. Okay, so let me do this. So as well as showing everybody in the class a picture of it, You know, I was saying earlier I had that nice rig at home, and I was a little disappointed that we did in class because I don't have the rig in the classroom, and it's not gonna produce videos as quite as nicely with as little effort as I put into those. And one of the things I really like about running on Discord is the bot that Professor Broderick and I put together, particularly for randomly choosing students. And the reason I did the bot is because prior to that, I had this app. And the app, I can pull down like that, and it will randomly select one of the students in the class. So I'm going to ask everybody in order, in random order, what goes into a status report. So Eric, you're up.
When you met, what was talked about, what the project is overall.
Okay, that'll do. Anthony, you're up.
Current progress, future endeavors, and ultimate goal.
Alright.
Sort of just like a timeline of what's been done and what's planning to be done.
Okay.
Other Kyle. The setbacks, if you had any, and yeah, I guess completed goals.
Completed goals is important. It's one of the things with projects is you don't want to feel like a death march, right? You want to, maybe it's a bit of an overstatement, but you want to celebrate the wins you have along the way, the things you get done. Right?
Set goals and target the next minute, trying to be done with them.
Okay. Jacob?
Basically what has been completed so far on the project, but what you could do going forward, like what you could interpret going forward with that information.
Okay. Fahim?
Yeah. It's about what's have to be done in the project and what's the expected have to be done in a matter of time.
Okay, time is important. So one of the things that defines a project over some other corporate activity is a project has a defined timeline. It's got a deadline. It's got a series. Michael.
Time frame on when you met, how long you met, status update on where you're at in the project and the goals.
Okay. And the only two left are Michael and Mike. So, Michael. Yeah.
I would say if you're doing like open problems or issues from past weeks and bring them up
So that's a really good point. In any sort of meeting, so for me, if anybody ever asks you to go to a meeting and they don't give you an agenda, don't go to the meeting. It's rude, but it gets the point across. If anybody asks you to go to a meeting and they have an agenda and no action items come out of the meeting, don't go to the next meeting that person calls. Right? The whole point of a meeting is it's required for discussion of the agenda. If no discussion is required, you might just as well send an email, right? If it's just information. Sometimes, like if you've got a celebrity guest or something like that, sometimes a meeting like that is okay, but then it's more of a presentation than a meeting. So I used to work at United Technologies Research Centre over in East Hartford, in Pratt, and they loved their meetings. And I used to go, and this was several years ago, and the charge out rate, the research centre at what used to be UTC, I suppose it's now Raytheon, it used to be used as a consultancy for all the other business units. Carrier, Otis, what used to be Hamilton, Sunstrand, Pratt, even back UTC Power, UTC Fire and Security, before those disappeared. And the charge out rate for a research centre person to any of those business units was $65 an hour. So whenever anybody called a meeting and I wasn't impressed with it, I'd tally up the number of people in the meeting times the time in hours times $65, just to see whether I thought the meeting was worthwhile. Right? If you have 10 people in a room for an hour, 11, so a little over an hour, multiply that up by 65, that's $650. Was that meeting worth $650? Okay, sorry, a bit of a rant. And Michael laughed. Okay, so I think you've all got a pretty good idea. I'm gonna, let's just go with the darker paper. So let me see if I can write standing up. I talked about software meetings, and software meetings, stand-ups, daily stand-ups. They have 3 questions you've got to answer. And the questions are, what have you done since the last meeting? Number 2, what will happen before the next one? Oops. Let's try that. And then the last question is, what's stopping you getting it done? Sometimes it's called, what are the blockers? Okay. Whether you can see all of that, let me see if I can scroll it up a little bit. So what I want you to do is talk to your group mates now, and then in about 5 minutes I'm going to get each group to give me your first status report. Okay? So that's so let's go with that.
So I've been working on web development, somewhat app development. I won't say I know how to make an app yet, but I have a pretty good idea.
I'll be right back.
Yeah, I wrote the question. I was even thinking that instead of making an actual app, just make a website. Log into such and such form. Here, as an app. But easy way out. Easy way out. Like for example, if you want to website. But there's a desktop view and a mobile view. So I'm just going to
Okay, well, I have a Windows.
that's what I've been doing.
So I told you I was learning a new Fusion 360. My job is like a 3D modeling CAD/CAM software. So that might come in handy if we're still thinking about 3D printed parts. Generate code that goes through the printer.
Okay, but both are Windows, right? Okay, so it's in the same language.
So that probably should be like, that will be, next week. Exactly.
I feel like we should skip out.
And I'll bring in, because I have the Arduino and the Raspberry Pi at home.
I want to pay for some school funding, so then I'll start printing.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure we go through that. Let's talk
to them first.
Yeah.
You know, where the funding comes from. Although,
I don't know, we also have this kind of working on stuff, I love YouTube stuff and shit, I'm not
Well, not
really
YouTube.
working versus this. Oh, I know why, that's my problem.
Well, that's inevitable.
I'll try and
especially teaching yourself.
I think the first we need to tackle is just. Then we have to figure out.
So we do have a bunch of functions. Or even divide it.
Okay.
Show you glory.
Yeah.
So lately I've been.
So basically, the next thing. The next thing we need to do is we'll find out. You want to send it to this work?
It's not PDF.
Yeah, the old one I still have. Okay, but I think we break it down, you guys like one of those.
No, the one
Subtraction,
process pretty well.
You have this project out. You guys have a police like this?
Yeah.
What would you guys do? So that's just basically.
Basically, anything I'm not seeing in the
That one there. But see, I'm having stuff over my ears, use my hearing aids. Whenever I take the ones with the loops over the ears off, I pull my hearing aid off.
No way.
So I've gone with my
But I could definitely.
That seems good.
More hardware.
Yeah.
I would just need.
I'm more like hardware, yeah.
Okay, shall we get back into the states?
2 on software, 2 on hardware.
So can I have somebody from the security team give a status report? I'll just, even though this is a camera, I'm just using it for the microphone.
So, over the summer, Mike here has been working on developing coding skills necessary for creating our app that we'll use to control it. I've been learning some 3D modeling that we'll be using for 3D printing parts that we'll need.
Ah, very good.
Yep. These guys have also been working on some coding, stuff like that, looking into what we can do for hardware as well. As far as what we'll do before the next meeting, we're actually thinking about, we want to start getting the parts in that we need, get those coming in from Amazon. And as far as what's stopping us, nothing really.
Okay,
Just gotta keep going.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
So just a note on the parts piece. There is a bit of a budget for each team, but you'll have to go through. I have to figure out what the procedure is.
Okay.
We can get stuff from places other than Amazon, but Amazon is so much easier than any other place.
Definitely.
Just go with Amazon if you possibly can, even if it's more expensive.
Mm-hmm.
You will need to give Amazon links and various other things, price and. But let me figure out. That's one thing for me to do. Is the process and what the budget is. To see how we do that. Okay. In the past, there has been zero budget. So this is the first cohort that I've had where that's been a possibility. I did actually get these, but that was me asking for it for the class, which is separate from you asking for it for the project. Okay. Thank you, security group. We get the refrigerator group up.
All right. Well, since last meeting, nothing really happened, honestly.
And that is exactly what 90% of the teams I've worked with over the last 2 cohorts has happened over the summer. The first cohort had lots of great plans and nothing happened. The second, I told the second cohort to be suspicious about plans over the summer, and I think one person did something. So
Yeah,
that's
why
okay.
we didn't plan anything. So, before the next meeting, we just plan on doing a lot of research regarding the coding for the app we plan on developing. Also looking into getting the parts in, like when we'll be getting them in, like weighing out, shipping things, and nothing's really stopping us right now, unless there's some sort of shortage.
Okay. So there is a bit of a chip shortage, so just be careful with that, depending if that's part of the list. Okay, and the parking group.
Yep, so over the summer, we've been, of course, looking at all kinds of Arduino stuff, better understanding that, and we've been working on just overall templates for that kind of stuff. We've been looking at projects that aren't the same, but obviously aren't exactly the same, but they have a little bit of similarities. We've been working with those, and we've been trying to find parts and stuff. What we want for the future is, first off, to examine those templates and kind of put them together, and add in our own stuff, of course, and work out any kinks that any of them have. And the only thing holding us back is the time constraints, and unforeseen consequences. So,
Right.
nothing really that we know of.
So I said to the group over here, the two things that people usually talk about in what's stopping you is time and life. Right? So I can't do anything about either of those, really. So if there's something as far as ordering parts or a problem, then I can possibly do something. So what I would like you to do now is to log in, one of you, into Blackboard. And what you should be able to see in Blackboard, if I can manage to put a knot in my USB cable. What you should be able to see if you get into Blackboard, maybe?
Is it the group stuff, like separated into create those and copy?
Yeah, so you should be able to see it did actually come through. Professor Broderick is always cursing this because where his office is has 0 cell phone coverage. And being able to log in requires, well, there's also an app now which makes it a little better. So let's just try this. I need to go through a bit more red tape, but let's just get this done first. And there it is. So you should see courses and 498. And you should see groups. And so, for example, they're the tools. I would like you to use the journal version there, right, where you can just go in and click create journal entry, and make sure you do that every week. I will give you time in these sessions to do it. Yeah. So if you want to do that now, and then I'll bring you back and I'll go through some red tape. Okay, so you can use one of the machines or you can use your laptop and type up what you just told me about your status report.
Yeah, pretty much. Just saying, we made it 12
Anyway, we
We like fill them out every week, but we were like, just putting whatever in there.
Oh, yeah, yeah. See that?
So now I gotta get a new reasonable.
What is it?
So, are we supposed to each read one?
We're still working on that.
Basically, kind of what we spoke about, I'm guessing. It's like a small Saturday or those three questions. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't get it, so I should have, yeah, that happens
He's a good teacher. He's a good teacher. It's just like
No, he's
oh yeah. Yeah. So he seems very good at the start, but then after.
that's true.
But he's a very good teacher. But the curriculum gets tough. Yeah, the curriculum is. Yeah, the curriculum. No, he's a good teacher. It's just the.
I thought we were missing something. That's scary.
Yeah, if he got top, yeah, you'll be fine.
Talk to him like if you're having problems.
Yeah, like email him and stuff. If you show him that you're actually trying in this class, that seems really hard. So if you like email him meetings,
Gotcha.
you'll see that you're actually trying, and like if you have like a C plus, you can actually
Thank you.
I'm my last two.
Peter, you wanted the answers for our. That is very quick.
Yeah, see if throw it in there.
If you can pronounce them, that's okay, but let's be
Yeah.
Let's go before.
Yeah. I don't know. I totally missed over that, I think, because it's a 200 level class. I looked at that ages ago, so that's all I have this semester. Yeah, you had 2 classes this semester also. You said something similar. Oh, last semester.
You stopped at nothing last year.
Nothing was stuck.
Only concern me was last day was presenting the project before this room and another thing.
Yeah, instead of just like seeing virtual cameras, we just like speed. Yeah, look in the eye. Yeah, look in the eye. This guy.
But let's just take it to like
Yeah, once we get to that point, like
This one was
the last like 2 weeks like that, practice the presentation.
yeah, that's what I was doing the last semester. So a boy presented. We watched this presentation. So, yeah. Yeah, they were fun. Only last time was
Okay, so security. That's a start, but what are you actually going to have done by next month?
Oh, that's what you want in there specifically?
Okay. You want to, and I would suggest at least 4 bullet points. Okay. I'm not going
Kind of, yeah, it's like. Rather than
It's crazy.
But you could take that and then talk about how this could help us in the future. Break down once we get the outline though, then we'll be fine.
Yeah. Like I've got things we have that.
Then also add what you reflect with
And then we need another
What do you
section
just
of
like add a
what we're
sentence?
going to do for next
I
week.
guess they probably three parts that you have to put down. So,
No, our full set price, the full set price. We should probably actually know what the full budget is. You should probably actually figure out how much we actually need to spend. That would actually be helpful. Where's PDA? PDA, RA.
Yeah, that's it.
That sounds very good. Well, we have. Oh, of the actual.
I mean, yeah, just continue. Yeah, that'll just be like running task until we got everything.
You could get like, you could also add maybe.
Well, that's part of finalizing the
I
budget.
used to have, I'm trying to think of.
You can add it.
I used CAD, I used,
Like I said, everything basically.
We could, no, I was gonna say that we could start thinking about like, who is gonna be what.
Oh, yes.
You want this just
Signing so that way,
Sorry, what was that?
I was wondering, you want us to post it first?
yeah.
Rather work on this one, so that's
I'm reviewing this.
I'll just go. The signing project is over.
It's more about dimensions.
slow us down.
Well, yeah, that's the point.
Okay, let's just come back again. So I gave the security group, they were the first ones to post their report, and they're editing it as we speak. But so we discussed what we did over the summer regarding our project, also the steps we're going to undergo before the next meeting. The only obstacles that may hinder us are our personal life, work and other classes. So the feedback I gave is that particularly the steps we're going, that's not specific enough, right? The aim with these is to be as specific as possible, so you know what you have to do, your teammates know what you have to do, and I know what you have to do, right? And the standard acronym that people use in project management is SMART, right? Where's the list? Lost my mouse, there it is. Right, so S is specific. If there's any ambiguity, try and remove the ambiguity. Maybe there's ambiguity because you don't know, in that case it's a bit of a research project, that's okay, but make it specific about what you want to get out of that research project. It has to be measurable. Are you going to have a decision on an IDE? Are you going to have a decision on a programming language? Are you going to have a decision on the parts? That's specific. It has to be achievable. Right? Are you going to be able to do it by next week? It's possible that some stuff you have to do is going to take longer than a week. That is okay. But break those longer term goals down into weekly, measurable, specific things you can do to get there. R is relevant, right? It's got to be to do with your project, the security, the parking. the fridge. It's got to be to produce that product. And now there's lots of stuff you've got to do, and some of it may seem a little off to the side, but it's still got to be done. But make sure it's relevant. And then the last one, the T, time bound. Part of the reason why software projects have used the agile methodology for a while is because previously, with the standard waterfall approach to project management, which is very useful in places like construction or that sort of thing. Software used to only deliver something to the end user right at the end. And the problem people found is that what was delivered after 6 months worth of work or a year's worth of work wasn't what the customer wanted. So what they do now is they break the iterations down into 2, 3 or 4 week sprints or iterations. And at the end of each of those short sprints, they show either the customer or what's called the product owner, the person who's supposed to know what the customer wants. They show what they've done in that short time-bound interval. And the aim is twofold. A, you get some idea of progress, right? That's partly why I want you to report every week, to get an idea of progress. And when there's no progress, like around midterms, there probably won't be any progress. But it's obvious that there's no progress. And the other thing is, with construction, requirements don't change as much. With software, things can change on a dime, right? So if you have this big requirements document up front and that's all you're ever going to do, getting that changed is difficult. So people prefer to work towards initially a minimum viable product, something that does a bit of what the customer wants, and then iterate from there to get the product better. So that's that was my feedback for the security group. Let's see what we can. Well, there's a new one for this. Let's have a look at the fridge group. Okay. So research on app development, research coding languages, research parts design. So there are 3 things. I'd like it a little bit more specific, or at least maybe just change the way it's worded, perhaps. For app development, maybe it's decide on development environment or something like that. For coding languages, probably related, but decide on a coding language. And parts, compile a parts list, right? So that hopefully by next week we can at least order stuff through. I'll try and get back to you before this session next week to tell you what the process for ordering is. And then we have okay, so examine templates, work out any future kinks will arise with compiling code, design preliminary documentation on system housing. Okay, that's pretty good. So I had some. I made a comment there. You'll see on the.
Yeah, about the IDE.
Yeah. So Arduino has a pretty nice IDE. There's a better one that you can run with inside Visual Studio Code. There's some nice plugins that work at least as well, sometimes a little better than the Arduino IDE, and I can point you to that. So let me make a note to post that information. What I'd suggest is have a look at that way of doing things and compare it with the Arduino IDE. The issue with the Arduino IDE is that it's got a few too many guardrails, right? Which is good if you're learning, but if you actually want to produce a product, you want to sometimes you want to get around the guardrails. Okay, so I'll see about posting about that. Okay. And let's have a look at the security groups update. Okay, finalize budgets and other parameters, continue learning, begin assigning project roles. Time to work, lack of knowledge. So, that lack of knowledge, I'm hoping you know already 90% of what you have to do. Right? Maybe 80%. 80-20, but let's go with 80%. Right? If you need to know something and I can help, tell me, give me enough time to prep, and I will make that information available during these sessions. I'll try and talk about stuff on the fly. Right? If I have time to prep, then I can actually be a bit more effective than if you just ask during these sessions. So feel free to ping me on Discord or what have you. Email personally. What do we got? Okay. So, as far as grading those status reports, the grade is existence, non-existence. Right? I will give you feedback to make sure that, like I gave pretty much everybody, to make sure that I'm happy with the status report. But if you submit one for the week and you take action if I give you feedback, that's all that's needed. Right? If you don't submit one then for a week, then that's a drop. So make sure you submit something. Okay, I did want to go quickly, I probably should have done this earlier, through the syllabus. I sort of touched the high points in the slides. Before I go on, does anybody have any questions about status reports? Are we all good? Okay. So, I know you all have the prerequisites, so I don't know why I bothered putting it up there, but I have to. There is no recommended text. That's where we are. I don't have an office. That's one nice thing about the new building. There is actually a desk area for adjuncts, right? So if I have office hours, I can set up there, but I don't. But I am available on Discord and as per last semester, so just feel free to ping me there. And that's the picture we went through. This actually is a bit different from what I had on the other slide. and I need to fix this. So, where are we? So some of those numbers are wrong. There is really no homework except getting your project done. But I expect you to work through the semester. Yeah, please get stuff done on time. I've taken the view that once you miss the deadline, I usually give people a week to actually make the deadline, and sometimes that works. I don't know what happened over the summer. Maybe it was just because the class I taught 236 circuit analysis over the summer, and I could not get people to submit stuff, even with delays and extra things. So please get stuff done on time. Online plans. If the campus shuts down, we'll just revert to the way we worked last semester. That's not ideal. But I'm hopeful that won't happen. And B, if it does happen, I'm going to try and get this lot of students access to this lab anyway. Right? I was able to do that for the last cohort of 498 students. Only a couple of the groups, I think I had 6 groups that cohort. Only a couple of the groups took advantage of it, but it will mean you can get into this lab, provided it's not being used for teaching, between whatever the usual hours are, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. You don't know what they're doing with the student monitor, but you'd have to go talk to the student monitor who usually sits in the lab, the mechanical engineering lab up. If you need it. Normally this part of the semester it's not needed, but later on. So academic honesty. So that's not as big a deal in this class as in some of the more technical classes, but you can't just copy somebody's project from the net and expect to get a reasonable grade from it. Huh? For a start, projects are much easier for me to search for than some other sorts of assessments, so please do that. Special needs, if any of you have any special needs, I think that's the number to call. They will let me know what else. That's the schedule. So I would suggest the faculty had a long discussion on one of the listservs, and this one of the I think he's philosophy professor, he came up with this list of things, and I think it's actually pretty good. So I just cut and pasted into both of my syllabi. So if you're not fully vaccinated yet, please get fully vaccinated as soon as you can. Please, you're all wearing face masks, please do that. Please maintain social distancing. I think we're mostly doing that. If you're exposed, get tested. If you have symptoms, isolate. And be prepared to go remote. I'll let everybody know if we go remote. But please have a read through the detail there. Has anybody got any questions about? Okay. I think that's all I wanted to talk about there. So there was one more thing I quickly wanted to mention, maybe. Yeah, we've got plenty of time. Who here has used Git or GitHub? 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, at least there's one in each group. That's at least one in each group. That's really good. So this, my connection with it started in software, right? And there's this problem with software in that it's not necessarily clear what the right way to solve a problem is. So you write some code and you solve most of the problem, and then there's some tiny little thing that you need to fix, and you try and solve that. And in that, trying to fix that tiny little thing, you make more changes to the code. And what happens is everything breaks. You don't even have what was working before working. So what people early on with software decided to do is to do what's called version control. And the early versions under Linux or Unix were SCCS or RCS, Revision Control System. And then other things came out. Microsoft came out with a thing called Visual Source Safe that has gone through many iterations and is now called, I think, Team Foundation, which has also included a lot of project management things in, as well as the base revision control. And basically what it lets you do is it lets you keep a complete snapshot of the code as it was when it was working to some level. Right? And that way, when you do that little change and it breaks everything, you can revert back to a known good position. Right? And that is so incredibly valuable. Way back when, in the dot-com boom, I was working in a software company in Ireland. And one of my colleagues had been working on a particular feature that we were anxious to get. And they were working on the feature for about 3 weeks and had not committed any code to what was our Visual Source Safe repository at the time. Their computer had a hard disk crash, so they lost 3 weeks worth of code. Now, thankfully, like I said, it's sometimes software is a little finicky to know exactly what the right thing to do is. But they were able to get their computer back up and running, and they then finished the piece in a week, right? Because they knew exactly what they had, well, 80% of what they had to do by that stage. Maybe if they hadn't or had committed their code to the repository, it would have only taken them a day. These days, a different approach to version control has happened. There's a thing called, so the way SourceSafe works, the way Subversion, which is another newer control system, works, is you have a copy of the piece that you're interested in on your local machine, and then you push to a centralized repository. What things like Git and Mercurial have done differently is that there's no centralized repository, or at least you could have many central repositories. So everybody on their computer has a complete copy of the code database. All the changes, all the rollbacks, all the comments is on everybody's machine. And the nice thing about that is you can have your copy locally, you can push it to GitHub so that somebody else can pull it down, or you can get them to pull it from your machine. You don't have to have just GitHub. You can push it to GitHub and Bitbucket and GitLab. So it's quite useful. So what I suggest is I'll just give you a quick right. So I've just made a directory called project, and this machine has Git installed. All of these machines have Git installed. One thing you can do is get yourself a USB stick and keep your code on your code repository on that USB stick, as well as up in the. That way you can just come in here, do the work on the USB stick here, commit stuff, and take it away again. But what you can do here, right, is if I want to make a new project, I can just say git init, right, and there I've now got a new project. And right, so and you normally with GitHub projects, there's a readme.md, which is a markdown, which is like a simplified HTML, really. Right, I can just do that. Right, and now if I do git status, it's a bit hard to read maybe. Let me oops, didn't want to do it quite that far. There we go. So git status, no commits yet, untracked files, readme.md in red. Right? So what I do is I add the readme using git add, and now it'll show in green that there's a new file. That file hasn't yet been put into the database, right? But it's been readied to go into the database. To put it into the database, you need to use the commit command, and I usually put a message with each commit, so -m and then the message in double quotes. Right, and now that I've done that commit, everything is pretty good. What I can then do is I can go to GitHub and I can create a new repository, and I'm just going to call this 498 example. And I'm going to make it public so everybody can see it. I'm not going to put in a description. I'm not going to add a git ignore. I'm going to create the repository. Okay. So now what I want to do is I want to put the thing that I made on my local machine, I want to push that up to GitHub. And that's what the second option here is telling me how to do, right? Add the remote, make a branch called main, and then push. So I should be able to go here, and what we should see when after this push command happens, I'm hoping, there we go. So this particular one login failed. I might have to look up my password. Okay, and I want to search for GitHub. I thought I typed it correctly before, apparently not. Apparently not. Still login failed. That's a bit rude. Anyway, that should have, so my problem with this is at home I tend to use SSL, and that's a certificate base, so I never have to type my password. So I don't know what's happening there, but anyway, what that should then do is push it up to GitHub, so there's a copy, and then other people can go in. Right, other people can go in and say, right, so there's the line. And you can go git clone and it's just telling me I appear to have cloned an empty repository. It'll go up and it'll get all the pieces from the repository. Okay. I suggest certainly any software you have goes up there. I'm less inclined to put things like Word documents and with their binary, and they tend to change a lot for no readily apparent reason. but certainly code, any KiCad or 3D files, 3D printing files, they should all go up there. So the things I want you to do for next week, be ready to have that list of parts. I will tell you how to order it, but make sure you have that list of parts and can report out if you had that item on your list of things to do. Be able to tell me what your group GitHub repository is. And I think that's about it. Let me just go check back here. Didn't have anything more there. Oh, if you are interested, and maybe you're not, but I put in here the feedback I got from last 498 coding in the teaching evaluation. Okay, so I can perfectly understand number one. I can perfectly understand number four. Right, the whole point of capstone is that we do stuff. Unfortunately, do stuff together. Some people, I don't know whether it's this person, but there's a couple of people mentioned Git, which is why I'm mentioning it now. At least one person mentioned soldering. I'm happy to get you to solder in here, just for an example. I might do that next week. I'll see. I think we have lots of soldering irons in the back room there. I have 2 Raspberry Pi Ws, they're little tiny Raspberry Pis, if anybody is interested. I have 4 Arduino Unos, if anybody is interested to take one. Anybody got any questions? Okay, I'm done. So let's leave it there. Let's leave it there. And I'll see you next week with those 2 things. I have 2 things. I have to tell you about Amazon orders and the Arduino replacement IDE.
Tomorrow gonna be a light load.
What's that?
He's asking if you're gonna be here for 4 hours tomorrow. For live design.
So last time I did that course, it was fully online and I pretty much talked for 4 hours, which is not going to happen. I'm trying to split it up a bit, break it up a bit, and I have
MSRP price.
I have what do you call it? I now actually have enough of the development boards to have 1 per person. And I'm going to get you to do some of the labs in class, which I really couldn't do when everything was online. Whereas here, it's got the actual multi-sim or Quartus installed here, so it'll be here. It should be a bit more interesting than just sitting for 4 hours. Yeah. Okay.
I'll see you tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
See you tomorrow.
See ya.
We have
Yeah.
Take care, bro, sir.
See ya.
Alright, right. That's perfect.
Have a good weekend, sir.
Yeah, you too.
As far as the job, so to the title, official title,
Yep.
IT specialist?
IT systems and technology specialist. It's a long title. But, so basically this whole summer has just been training to learn what our current process. Basically,